All right, this video is going to be part one of a review for the Unit 4 test. All right, so in this first one, we have an equation. It says, what is the slope of the equation 3/4 x equals 48? Okay, now, just real quick. I know you probably see that fraction, and that fraction is probably going to be a little difficult for us to understand, but 3/4 x equals 48. Okay, well, what we'd end up doing is we would divide by 3/4 on both sides, okay? And when you do that, you're going to get the answer of x equals 64, okay? So what we have is an equation where x equals 64. So this is not a y equals mx plus b or anything like that. We just have x equals 64. Well, let me sketch that real quick just so we understand what that means. If we have our x and y grid and x is equal to 64, that means the x value is always 64. And let's say this happens to be 64 here. It's always going to be 64. So we end up with this vertical graph at x equals 64, or a vertical line. And remember, when we use vertical, we're going to use the phrase VUX, VUX, where the V stands for it's vertical, the U stands for the slope is undefined, and the X, of course, is the equation x equals a number, and this one is x equals 64. So as soon as you see this, you should understand that we're going to have an undefined slope. So the answer to that slope is undefined. Okay, and then it says, it wants to know, this equation, which is really x equals 64, is parallel to which axis? Well, if this is the line and it's parallel then to this axis, which is the y-axis. So it's parallel to the y-axis, and it is perpendicular to the x-axis. It's perpendicular because these two lines intersect and create 90-degree angles. All right, question number 2. What are the slope and equation of a line that passes through the point -2.5 and 14 and is parallel to the line y equals 8? Okay, parallel. This should jump out at you. It's parallel to the line y equals 8. Well, let's just sketch what y equals 8 could look like. If y equals 8, that means the y value is always 8. So let's say y value is somewhere up here at 8, okay? So if that is at 8, then we would always have a line at 8, okay? So we'd have a dot here, 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 and we would end up with this horizontal line at y equals 8. Horizontal line, okay? Now remember, when we talk about horizontal lines, we use the mnemonic HOY, H-O-Y, okay? The H being it's a horizontal line. The Y being the equation is y equals a number. In this one, it's y equals 8. And the O stands for how we describe the slope, which is supposed to be a 0. So we actually call this a 0 slope. All right? Well, if the new equation is parallel to y equals 8, then it's also going to be a horizontal line. And if it's also a horizontal line, then it's also an equation of y equals a number. Well, how do we find the number? Well, they gave us a point that includes a y value of 14. That means y is always going to be 14. So maybe it's somewhere up here, but we know that our equation is y equals 14. Y equals 14. All right. Question number 3. The graph of line G is shown. So here's line G. Okay, then it says, which of the following represents an equation parallel to the G? Okay, so let's take a look at our answers here. Our answers are 3x plus 2y equals 10, negative 2x minus 3y equals negative 2, 2x plus 3y equals 12, and x equals 2. All right, you'll notice that these are not in y-intercept form, okay? But we want to know which one is parallel to G. Well, if we're talking about parallel or perpendicular lines, you need to immediately think about the slope of this line right here, okay? So the slope is going to be down 2 to the right 3. That's negative 2 over 3. So we have a slope of negative 2/3, okay? Well, if we have a slope of negative 2/3, then we're trying to identify which one of these also has a slope of negative 2/3, because that one would be parallel to line G. Now, each one of these are in standard form, okay? So let me remind you how to convert from standard form. If we have the answer A is 3x plus 2y equals 10. Okay, if we were to solve this for y equals mx plus b, we're trying to solve for y, so we're going to have to remove 3x from this side, so get y by itself. So that would look like this. So I would subtract 3x from here and subtract 3x from here. Then I would end up with 2y equals, and then I have my negative 3x plus 10. Then I would simply divide by 2 in order to get what y equals. And on this one, y equals negative 3/2 x plus 5. Well, you see the slope here is negative 3/2. Well, we're looking for a negative 2 over 3. Okay, so this line is not parallel. So A is out. Now, I also taught you sort of a shortcut, but what we notice is that the 3x, or the x value, comes over to the other side and becomes the opposite. If it was positive, it's negative. And then we end up dividing by the value with the y, okay? So the shortcut for determining the slopes of these lines to see if they're parallel to this one is to simply take the opposite of the A divided by B. All right, so for letter B, answer B, we have an A value of negative 2. Well, the opposite of negative 2 would be positive 2. So we have 2 over B, which is negative 3. So over negative 3. And you see there, 2 over negative 3 is what we are looking for. So 2 over negative 3 and negative 2 over 3 are the exact same slope. So line B is going to be parallel to this line. Now, if you keep working this one out, you will also see that answer C will also give you a parallel slope. So technically on this review, B or C would be correct. Okay, now let's take a look at number 4. This says some characteristics of line Z are shown. All right, now we don't see the diagram of line Z, but it tells us that line Z is parallel to the line represented by the equation 5x minus 4y equals 10. And line Z passes through the point 12, negative 7. What is the equation of the line Z? All right, well, what we know about line Z is that it's parallel to this equation. Well, hopefully parallel jumps out to you. Parallel means that line Z and this equation have the same slope. So we have to know the slope of this equation. Again, if you want to work it out, not if you want to work it out, we need to find what the slope-intercept form is. So 5x minus 4y equals 10 is this equation. All right, and it's parallel. The new line Z is parallel to this one, so we need to find the slope. Okay, so let's put it in y equals mx plus b form. The way that we do that is we subtract 5x from the left side so we can get y by itself. So we subtract 5x from this side. All right, now these canceled, so we were left with negative 4y equals. Okay, now we're not subtracting 5 from 10. This is a plus 10 minus 5x. Those are separate terms. All right, so we're just going to write minus 5x and plus 10. All right, then to finish this, we would divide by negative 4. And we end up with y equals positive 5 over 4, because a negative divided by a negative is positive. And then 10 divided by negative 4 is 2.5, so we're going to say minus 2.5, or minus 2.5, or minus 2.5. But what's most important is this slope, 5/4, because now we know the slope of the line Z because it has to be parallel to this line here. So I'm going to highlight this. This is 5/4, so that's going to be the slope that we're working with. The slope is 5/4. Well, if that's true, then now we have a point and a slope. So we're going to write equation using point-slope form, okay? The point-slope form is y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. All right, well, this is where we plug in y1 and x1 and the slope. We know the slope, we got it right here. We know x1, it's this value, 12. And we know y1 is -7. Now this minus is part of this form. So for y1, which is -7, we're going to take minus -7, which becomes +7. So really what we're doing is we're using the opposite of this value, which is +7. So in this equation, it now says y plus 7 equals and then the slope is 5/4 times x, and then minus 12. So this 12 is going to become a -12 inside the formula here, or inside the form. So -12, and then we stop. Now, if this is all the answers are in, then that may be your answer. That's in point-slope form, okay? We could go the extra step and go ahead and work this out by multiplying the slope 5/4 times these two values in the parentheses and then subtracting 7 from both sides. But you only have to do that if your answers on the test are in slope-intercept form, okay? All right. And this will be the last one for part 1. This says line D is graphed on the coordinate grid. Here it is right here. This is line D. What is the equation that can be used to represent a line that's parallel to line D and passes through the point 8,5? So we've seen one very similar to this, but if it's parallel to D, all right, then it's going to be another equation that either is that goes through y. Maybe it's up here at 4, or maybe it's down here at -5. We don't really know, but we do know that it's parallel. But we also know that it goes through the point 8,5. Well, if it has a y value of 5, then it's going to be going through 5, and that means y is always 5. So if we were to actually sketch this, then it would be right here at y equals 5, and that's the equation, y equals 5. And just a reminder, what do we call that? Slope. When it is a horizontal line, we use HOY, and the O actually stands for a 0, because we call that a zero slope. Zero slope. All right.